This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today we have Ross Hart back with us from the famous Hart family, former Stampede wrestling producer. He's wrestled for Stampede, he's wrestled for WWE, he's done it all, and thanks again for joining us today, Ross.
It's always great to be on your show, Devin.
There's a fan that has a question for you that wants to know if you have any plans to write a book about the Hart family full of untold stories.
Not at the moment, Devin, but in a few years, maybe after I retire from teaching, maybe. I know I'd have a lot of stories and anecdotes to share about the family and the promotion, but you have to be kind of sensitive about reliving some of those things because it would portray some family members or wrestlers better than others. Yet you want it to be honest, and it can't be all snuggly and fluffy stuff that just makes everyone feel good. Sometimes you got to deal with some character flaws and errors in judgment, I guess, and the good with the bad. But I've thought about it. If it could be a different perspective of my family experiences and what's happened in the industry from what other wrestlers have already written, I'd be interested in that. And I'm a pretty decent writer. I think after writing a lot of the press releases for our promotion for years and being an English teacher, I guess, for 25 years. So I probably know a thing or two about writing. So I just have to try and condense it to 2,000 pages or less. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of history to cover with Stampede Wrestling. Your brother did a pretty good book, Brett. I've read Bruce's as well, but Brett's seemed to be very historically detailed as far as Stampede as well as his WWE career. What did you think of Brett's?
I thought Brett's book was amazing. I thought it was the best autobiography written by any wrestler. I think it was largely because he had creative control over what he was writing. The publishing company gave him exclusive and creative rights over what he was writing, so that way they couldn't delete anything or take anything out. And that's unfortunately what happened with Bruce's book. I'm not sure who was publishing Bruce's book, which company, but they took out and deleted so many great stories and anecdotes that Bruce had written, and the book was far from what it should have been, especially since Bruce had an incredible memory and so many experiences to share, and yet his book wasn't as well received as Brett's because it was less in depth, and unfortunately the publishing company edited and took out so many parts of it. But Brett's was great. I really enjoyed it, and he's working on another book right now, but I think a different format. I think more about his childhood experiences. And what kind of led him into wrestling and some of his earlier role models, even from the 1950s and 60s that influenced him to get into wrestling and that had a lasting impression on him and his career. So I think it'll be an interesting book once it's finished.
Mike is asking on here if you still talk to Brett very often. I know that you guys keep in contact.
Yeah, I keep in touch with Brett pretty regularly. We don't see each other as much because of these COVID restrictions, but we keep in touch pretty regularly. And I'm involved in a table hockey league with him and some of his sons. So I was seeing pretty regularly up until the Corona period last year. And we keep in touch regularly, and sometimes he'll ask me for some ideas. I have a pretty good memory of some of the Stampede moments from the 60s or 70s, and even when Brett was out of the territory wrestling the WWE. So sometimes he'll call me and ask for some information or verification of some facts. And he's still got an excellent memory himself, though. Even though he had the concussions and the stroke, he's got a very sharp memory and good recall. But we keep in touch pretty regularly, Brett and I.
Someone on here says you look like Brett's twin, and another guy, Warrior Man, is asking is there any truth that sometimes you and Bruce would write Brett's Calgary Sun article for him when he was too busy?
I didn't. I think Bruce did write some of them, but Brett always edited them after. Brett always had creative control of them. I think that was mostly because Brett was on the road so much. He was wrestling for WWE and doing a lot of autograph sessions and press conferences, and he was getting a pretty good push at that time. So it wasn't that he wasn't capable of writing his own article; he just didn't have time. And Bruce was always an excellent writer, and he had so much satire and wit. So a lot of times he did write the article for Brett. I think Brett even admitted that in his book. But Brett always usually had creative control, before it was, written, before it went to press.
T.O. McConnell is asking, is it true that Bruce gave Stone Cold a punch in the kidney during that Stampede pay-per-view? I don't
apparently, allegedly, and I think it might have been a bit of a stiff shot. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just being caught up in the moment. There's 18,000 fans at the show, and I think Bruce was pretty egged on, and he might have caught Steve with a bit of a stiff punch. I know it wasn't intended, but it's just kind of in the heat of the moment. And but apparently Steve was slightly injured and didn't wrestle at the TV tapings the next day. But I know it was not a stiff potato intentionally. It was just one of those things that happens, and it just showed Bruce was very intense, and the whole angle was so well received, with the Hart Foundation against Stone Cold and the other American wrestlers, and that Canadian side of it, where all the fans were cheering for the Hart Foundation, and the Canadian side, even though they were heels or villains everywhere else, was just electrifying. I've never seen that kind of response at any WWE shows in Calgary ever since then. It was just amazing.
Mike wants to know if you ever had any interactions with John Tenta, who I guess was friends with Brett.
Not personally. I followed John's career a lot when he was a sumo wrestler, and then debuted in Japan with All Japan for a number of years, and then he got his big break as Earthquake in the WWE. So I saw him at a couple of shows in Calgary, and was just very impressed with how big he was, how quick he could move for his size, and really good balance as a sumo wrestler, but and as a professional wrestler, being over 350 pounds. But I didn't know him personally, but I had seen him at some shows, and he was a very nice guy.
Andre is asking, which Stampede wrestling angle garnered the most attention, in your opinion?
Probably the angle with Bad News Ellen and the Stomper in 1983, with the Stomper's son's neck getting broken when he got pile drived into the floor by Kerry Brown, and the Stomper Bad News turned on the Stomper with a fork. And, there was a near riot in the arena. The fans were just going absolutely nuts, and it got such major heat. Several fans got trampled in the stands because people were all running to or from where all the action was going on at ringside, and the Stomper was flinging chairs, going berserk apparently after finding out his son Jeff's neck had been broken, and there was just so much heat. And Ed Whalen actually resigned. He resigned as the commentator of the show because he felt the angle was too surreal and it got too much heat. And the Overzealous Boxing and Wrestling Commission suspended my dad's license a week later on the day of the show in which Bad News was supposed to fight the Stomper in the pavilion that night. And there were 2,200 fans lined up outside the pavilion that night, minus 35 weather. And the Boxing and Wrestling Commission very deliberately suspended my dad's license. And they suspended Bad News Allen as well, his license to wrestle, for about a month. So unfortunately, that killed the angle and killed the drawing power that it had. And And we had to run our shows on a native reserve outside the city where there really wasn't busing or transportation, and it was really unfortunate. But it was just one of the hottest angles that I've ever recalled, and it was just the potential there to have several weeks of huge crowds. And it was such a matchup between the Stomper and Bad News. The two most powerful, legendary heels on the promotion. And it was really cut short by the commission's intervention there.
Herb Simmons is saying hi, and Wavell Starr is saying hi to you on here. Do you think Wavell could have made it bigger if he had had the right opportunities? It seemed like he had a lot of potential, but he never got that shot that he needed.
No, and it was really unfortunate. It was a missed opportunity for him that he deserved, and for the WWE, especially with the emphasis on Aboriginals and their success in so many other sports. We see it in hockey, we see it in football, and there's no reason why Wavell couldn't have been well utilized. He had a great physique. He was a good performer. And I don't know, I think the WWE maybe just took him for granted. They just considered him to be a preliminary star, maybe because he maybe didn't train in their facility. Even though he had worked a lot for Stampede and had a lot of matches in Western Canada, they never really gave him that opportunity or chance. They used him on the undercard and on a lot of shows, but unfortunately never got a shot, on the TV roster, and it was a real missed opportunity because I think he could have made a lot of money for them and had a very bright future. And Red Thunder is another one that they kind of looked over and didn't give that opportunity to, but they were both good performers, and we saw the success that Tatanka had years before, and Morris Nepus and Wavell Starr definitely could have been assets to WWE, but they unfortunately didn't take advantage of them.
AJ is asking, what are your memories of the Stampede Corral? If anyone doesn't know, that's the building that's a little bit bigger than the pavilion where you guys would have special shows here and there.
Yeah, it was a larger building. It was before the Saddle Dome was built, I guess, in 1983. And that's where we used to have some of our bigger shows. But that's where the Flames were playing hockey before the Saddle Dome was built. And we would have our bigger shows quite often during the Stampede. It would seat about 7,500, and we filled it over the years a number of times, with some world title matches, or say when we were featuring Andre the Giant. But probably the biggest show I remembered might have been the classic Stampede 60-minute draw between Billy Robinson and Dory Funk. The Stampede in 1969. Just incredible, a huge crowd there, and the first time they'd ever wrestled, and what a classic match. It was 1 hour, and just a testament to both men's working ability, because they never had to throw one illegal punch or kick during the whole match. It was all ground wrestling, and a lot of suplexes and forearms and elbows, and just a beautifully paced match, from start to finish. But I remember another really classic Stampede Corral show in 1973 between Dan Crawford and the Stomper. It was a huge angle that led up to them finally having this showdown, and that was a huge crowd, and the atmosphere was just buzzing for that. But a lot of great memories of the Corral, and I was sad to see it torn down, but I guess it's been replaced now by expanded BMO Center, so that'll be great for a lot of events they have in the future. But a lot of great memories with some Stampede shows in the Corral from the 50s, and I think right to our last show. I think the last show we had there might have been in the mid 80s. I remember we had a really good 6-man tag match with Davey Boy Smith and Owen and Ben Basrab against the Karachi Vice, and that was great. I had a lot of memories of that, and that was probably one of our last big shows there.
I think you actually had one more in the 90s that was a mix between you guys and WWE for one of Stu's birthdays.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me. We had a special show honoring my dad's 80th birthday, and we called it the Showdown at the Corral. And yeah, that was great because we had wrestlers from WWF or WWE and WCW, and then just a lot of freelance independent wrestlers, which was incredible. So we had the Funk Brothers, we had Brian Pillman, we had Chris Benoit, we had Razor Ramon, Brett and Owen, Davey Boy, Tor Kamada came out of retirement, Dan Crawford did. X-Pac, or the 1-2-3 Kid, was on the show. And that was, it was a very special show that was honoring my dad's birthday, and we televised it as well, and it got a huge TV rating. But that was a very special show in the Corral.
Steve wants to know, is it true that Owen tried to get out of his WWE contract after the screw job to go to WCW?
My understanding is he did. He didn't want to work there anymore. He felt somewhat betrayed by what they did to Brett, and he didn't want to work there anymore, but they wouldn't release him from his contract, and they offered him more money to stay there. So he was the only one that kind of held out, but I know he initially asked to be released, and he was very outraged, as most everyone was, about how they'd screwed Brett and the way they handled the whole situation and the dishonesty involved and the cover-up. But they refused to let Owen out of his contract, and they offered him so much more money that he ended up staying. But I think he also had some misgivings about going to WCW. He was concerned about what they would do with him there, how they would handle him or use him, and maybe he didn't have the bargaining power that Brett did, or Davey at the time, because Davey went to WCW, and as we saw, they really misused Brett and Davey. They didn't seem to know how to incorporate them with their other talent, and they really wasted Brett and Davey when they went to WCW, and Brett was kind of just floundering there, and there's just very poor booking and handling of him, because he had so much potential to be a big star and help them in their war against the WWE, and unfortunately they really blew it there with Brett. So probably in hindsight, Owen made the best decision to stay with WWE, even though initially he wanted to leave and join Brett in WCW.
Did Brett ever push for WCW to come to Calgary? Because it seemed they really missed the boat there, not touring Canada once they got him on board.
I don't know if he ever suggested that. I think he would have. I know a few months after he was there, he was pretty disappointed in how they were using him, and he was just kind of being canceled out almost. They didn't really have a spot for Brett, and he was baby face and then heel, and they just dropped the ball with him so much, and I think after a while he became pretty discouraged, and if they were going to run a show in Calgary, they would have needed to feature him on top in a major match, and that's just an opportunity they really missed out on. But WCW never really made any inroads in Canada. I think they ran one or two shows maybe in Toronto, and that was about it. But they really missed the opportunity to run shows in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Montreal. And it was too bad, because they had huge TV ratings and incredible talent. But we all know that a lot of their house shows weren't very good. A lot of their bigger stars weren't showing up for the shows, and they were very poorly received, and that was one reason why they kind of collapsed later, because their house shows were so bad, and the crowd started dropping, and then just very poor storylines and angles on TV, and they really self-destructed. It wasn't so much that WWE had such a better product; it was WCW shot themselves in the asses and blew the gains they had on WWE. So. And Brett was just one example of one star they really wasted and didn't capitalize on.
709 Newfie wants to know, what was it like having Andre the Giant around the house?
He didn't come up too often, but once or twice. I think when we had some barbecues and functions, he was there. I had some different memories of Andre. At times, he could be very jolly and happy-go-lucky. He could be very festive if there were some drinks around, and he liked a lot of women around. Where he could be very charming. But I saw many times where he was very grumpy, very impatient. He didn't really want to extend himself to sign anybody's autograph or make public appearances. He didn't, I guess, like being exploited, like he was some kind of a freak or a unique attraction. And yet, that was the drawing point of him, to feature him at some of the events, especially for the Stampede. And he was very reluctant. He didn't want to appear at the grandstand show or the Stampede events or barbecues. Unlike the world champions like Harley Race or the Funks, they always made themselves available to go to those functions and shake hands with, the mayor and some of the media and celebrity members. And Andre was very standoffish, and at times, he could be pretty selfish and, reluctant to engage with others. And yeah, on some road trips, he was very happy if he could finish 2 or 3 cases of beer and be jovial with the boys or in a bar or a restaurant after. You saw a different side of him for sure.
Now, there's a fan on here that's asking if there's any future Harts in training. We all know about Ted had a little run. Davey Boy Smith Jr. is around. Natty's doing great, but any next generation coming up?
Yeah, my nephew Matt Smith's son. He's wrestling locally in Calgary right now. For the RCW promotion, and I think he has a great future. He's been wrestling now for about 2.5 years, and then unfortunately, because of the COVID situation, all the live events and shows had to be canceled. But he was looking really good when I saw him last spring, before the COVID situation. And I haven't seen him in action since, but I think he's still training and working out regularly. And he's a proud dad right now, too. So I know he's anxious to get back in the ring. But, I've been very impressed with his form. And I think he just gets that opportunity to work with some more experienced guys and develop some continuity and being able to wrestle on a consistent basis. And that's how you get better. I think he could have a bright future, and he certainly has the name behind him. And, Ted's still involved, I guess, in some promotions in the States and keeping his profile alive, I guess, especially with some of his outlandish YouTube videos. But Ted certainly has a lot of talent, though, and could make somebody the right money, if they can handle him and keep him under control.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for Harry to get picked up by WWE or AEW. Hopefully that happens sooner than later.
Yeah, I'm hoping too. Harry's got so much talent to offer, and right now with the pandemic, I'm not sure if they're hiring any new stars or talent, but I think he'd be an asset to either organization. And he's really been working out, training, doing a lot of Brazilian type wrestling and grappling, and he's well versed in MMA and in tremendous condition. So I think he'll be ready. I think it's just a matter of which organization makes a better offer to him. But Harry's still got a very bright future and so much to offer. So
I always say he's the best technical wrestler in the world today, in my opinion. Jet Fan 95 wants to know your thoughts on former Stampede star Biff Wellington passing away the same day as Chris Benoit. There's always conspiracy theories regarding that. Do you think it was just a coincidence?
I think so, but boy, what an odd coincidence, especially since they were very close. I think kept in close contact, but there is no real evidence that there had been any dialogue between them, any texts or emails. But it was just shockingly ironical that Biff died, I think within the same day or a day after Chris. Just very shocking and very unfortunate too. Shane Bauer, or Biff as we knew him, was a good performer. He was definitely one of the brighter stars for Stampede in the 80s, and he had a few trips to Japan and I think a tryout with WCW. Just unfortunately never got that opportunity or break. I thought he had a lot of talent, and he really complemented Chris well. They could have a great match together, and they could also be a great tag team. And it's just too bad he kind of got overlooked, and then kind of languished, I guess, in the smaller promotions in Alberta for a long time, and and unfortunately had some substance issues and never really rebounded. And it was too bad because it was just another career that didn't reach its potential, unfortunately.
Michael Collins would like to know which wrestler was the biggest pain in the rear end to deal with in Stampede. I guess maybe from your era and also your dad's. Who would it have been? Hopefully not me.
No. I'll have to be honest. I have to say Bad News Owen. He was very well paid. He was the highest paid wrestler, on our promotion, and that wasn't the problem in itself. But he wasn't the drawing card that he should have been on our promotions, and sometimes the issues he had, sometimes with other wrestlers, sometimes brawling outside the ring and among the fans, and issues with fans and potential lawsuits, and he became a target for the Boxing and Wrestling Commission in several cities like Calgary and Edmonton. He always just went overboard and sometimes didn't do what he was told. It was hard to handle. Could be very standoffish and militant at times, and he had an incredible athlete and legitimately one of the toughest guys in the business. Everybody respected him, were somewhat intimidated by him and feared him, but he could be very hard to handle, and there were a lot of problems he had with other wrestlers, and I know that's going to be one of our topics in this podcast later that you and I talk about, Devin.
Well, we can get into that now since it came up. Cuban Assassin Jr., Richie Avicito, I forget the last name. Yeah. He had brought up the conflict that Bad News had with his father that I had read about in Brett's book, speaking of Brett's book. And you were telling me you knew some details about that you could further explain to the fans.
And there's been a lot of versions of what happened between Owen and the Cuban, and what went wrong in their friendship, and then led to a very serious arch rivalry between them. That ended up in a couple of violent confrontations. Where weapons were involved, and very serious injuries, inflicted by each on the other, and it could have ended more tragically in serious injuries or a death. And I was well aware of it because they were both working for the Stampede promotion, and I was dealing directly with both Alan and Cuban. I was the TV director at the time, but sometimes I was an assistant booker and would handle a lot of the instructions for the spot shows and out of town shows. And I remember at the time, this was a few years after, I guess, and we have to put things into perspective because these two were both best friends at one time. They had been regular tag team partners on the Stampede promotion in 1983, 84, and had some incredible matches with Brett and Jim Neidhart and the British Bulldogs. And they were like brothers. They were so close to each other, and Angel, or the Cuban as we call him, was the best man at Alan's wedding in 1984. There was such a close friendship there, and both liked each other so much and would do anything for the other. And it was hard to believe that a few years later, after a couple of incidents that happened, I guess, led to some conflicts between them, and all of a sudden they became very bitter enemies, and kind of escalated from there. So, I can kind of explain what happened, but so they had been very close and friends and allies for a couple of years in the mid 80s, and then my dad closed the promotion, as most people know, and then restarted the Stampede promotion. 1985, 1986, and both Bad News and the Cuban were working for a promotion. And at the time, sometimes Angel would be the booker for us on our shows, especially if one of the Harts or a family member couldn't be at the shows. And I remember Bruce was out of action for a while. Bruce had blown his ACL in a match and tore his knee ligaments and was out of action for about 5 months, and couldn't go out of town to any of the road shows. And Owen hadn't started wrestling yet, and I was doing an intern teaching program, so I was only going to some of the shows, usually like Calgary and Edmonton. So we hired Angel to be kind of the booker for those shows, and he would get his instructions usually from me or my dad on what the finishes were, and those details of the shows. And so there was a situation, I guess this would have been in the spring of 1986, where we had a spot show in Saskatchewan. And Angel had been given his orders or directions to run the show, and what the matches were, and the finishes and all that. And he always did that very diligently. Angel was such a good representative for us, and very, very reliable. And he would always check with us at the end of the shows and let us know how things went. And he was just a great agent. Plus, he was an excellent booker, and probably one of the best finish guys in the business. Angel, he was so innovative, and he could come up with any finish between two guys. He could come up with a good scenario that would lead into a finish in like 2 minutes and make both of them look good. So all around, he was just great for that role when the family couldn't be at the shows. But anyway, but there was a spot show we had in Saskatchewan. And Alan was booked in a singles match. I think he was supposed to wrestle Dave Sheldon, the Angel of Death. And he decided he didn't want to wrestle in a singles match, and he took it upon himself to change the layout of the card and just said, no, I'm going to put myself in a 6-man tag match with 2 other wrestlers. I think it was maybe Jerry Morrow and Rudy Diamond, a couple of other black wrestlers. And Angel said, well, those aren't the orders. That's not what Ross and Stu asked for. And Angel and Alan basically just thumbed his nose, and just said, well, this is what I'm doing. I'm not working in a singles match. And, I think he, and the boys retired. They wanted to finish the show early. And, I know the travel had been long for a lot of guys, and the morale wasn't that high on a lot of the shows. Business hadn't been great for some time. So Alan just kind of took it upon himself to change the match and the layout of the show, and didn't figure anything would come of it. So Angel reported that back to me at the end of the week, and and I realized how difficult a position he was in, because he didn't want to be ratting out Bad News, and this was a guy that was his friend. He'd been the best man for his wedding and always had gotten along with him. But Angel was always very honest, and he just said, well, this is what happened at that show. And and he didn't make a big deal of it. He just said, this is what happened, and he wanted me to be aware of it. So I was somewhat upset about this, and I didn't feel I could approach Alan about it. At the end of the week, he probably would have been pretty oppositional and defiant with me. Especially since I was a lot younger, and who was I to rein in Bad News Alan or be reprimanding him for not following directions, or doing what he was told, even though, he was making so much money and should have been just doing what he was told. So, I approached my dad about it, and I just said, well, this is what happened in the show. And, it hadn't been the first case where Alan had changed orders and not done what he was told. And sometimes it could be like that, if he was working to rule or just not happy with the way the match was going, he would just change it, and a lot of times he'd gotten away with that. So I let my dad know about it, and my dad called him aside, I think at the TV tapings in Calgary a few days later, and very subtly approached him, not in front of the boys or anything like that. Just said, I'm paying you a lot of money, and I'm counting on you to be a leader, and you're one of the top stars, and you're going to lead by example. And if you're given orders, you need to carry them out. And if there's a problem, you contact me, but you don't just change your matches or finishes to suit yourself, So, and I think my dad was very tactful and diplomatic about that. But I guess Alan didn't like that and really overreacted. And my dad never cited Angel as the source, But I think Alan must have figured out, well, Angel must have ratted me out to the office, and Stu kind of reprimanded him, in his eyes anyway. After, he should have just let it go, and moved on from it. But he was very pissed off about it. So then, after that happened, he started taunting Angel and referring to him as a stooge in front of the other boys, I guess, in the dressing rooms and in the vans on the road trips, and this went on for several months. We would be saying, you got to watch, there's a stooge here in the dressing room, if you say anything or do anything out of line, and constantly referring to, Angel as a stooge, and, really just taunting him and belittling him. And this happened for a long time, and that shouldn't have happened. I suppose we should have dealt with it, but then, Alan left the promotion then for a long time. He was gone for almost a year. I think he went to Florida, and he was making trips to Japan. So we just kind of hoped things would kind of cool off there, and there wouldn't be, any more agitation or anything. And we had no sense that it was going to escalate, and become, more than just verbal, but it certainly did, And then a year later, when he came back, I guess it kind of continued. And I think for the most part, Angel was just ignoring it. He wasn't engaging Ellen, and he certainly didn't want to look for a fight with Bad News Ellen, So, and but it kind of escalated, and at this point, I think the wives got involved, and there's a lot of misconceptions that the wives were the ones that initially caused the dissension between them, and that's not true. There's already bad blood between them for at least 9 months, from that incident at the spot show. And then the wives really didn't get involved until sometime later. And then, I guess they started defending their husbands, and then there was some tension, I guess, between Bad News' wife, Helen Coach, and Angel's wife, Pat Acevedo. And there was some incident at the Mohawk gas station where we used to meet for the meeting. It was the meeting point to leave for the shows to Edmonton, and then we would stop there after the shows were over, and it's where the boys all parked their cars and gassed up for the shows. And I think the wives quite often would wait for their husbands to come back, and they would just wait in the parking lots in their vehicles. And there was some incident in the parking lot that night when the wrestlers were coming back from Edmonton. And I'm not positive about what happened, but apparently Helen Coach thought Pat, Angel's wife, was bad-mouthing her or trash-talking Alan, and the way he was treating Angel. And so she confronted her in the parking lot when she was sitting in her car. And I'm not sure what exactly happened. Either she punched her or slapped her, but there was some altercation between the wives that happened there. And then when Angel got back, I guess, from the show in Edmonton, must have been like 2-3 in the morning, he was very upset. He was outraged. He called Bad News on the phone and confronted him about his wife attacking his wife in the parking lot. And this is a case where the wrestlers are having to defend their wives, and stand by their wives, but it can also escalate things, where you have to defend their honors, and unfortunately then there's no turning back, there's no mediation, there's no cooler heads prevailing. So apparently in this phone call, there are some heated verbal exchange, but they agreed to meet in the Denny's parking lot over in the south end of the city. And this is where each of their versions of what happened are a little bit different. And I just picked up speaking with both of them after and hearing them talk about what happened after the incident. And there was definitely some discrepancies between each of their versions of what happened. But Angel, his version was that he went to the Denny's parking lot to meet with Alan and talk it over, that he really didn't want to have a physical altercation or a fight with Alan of any kind, but he went there to settle it like men and to try to leave the wives out of it. And that was his version, and yet, he had a knife in his boot. Like he seemed prepared if it came to that, to use his knife. But he said, he went basically to try and reason with Alan and, end the trash talking and, the stuff that was going on between them. And, certain boys were taking Alan's side and some boys were taking Angel's side, and, it was creating kind of a toxic atmosphere in the dressing room as well. So Angel said he went there, to talk about it man to man, but did not want to get into a physical fight with Alan. Alan's version, though, was that, the phone call was basically a challenge, like meet me in the parking lot and we'll settle it, and Alan basically came there to fight, and so some differences from each of them in their accounts of what happened. But anyway, so they met in the parking lot at this Denny's, which was still open. Denny's is always open 24 hours. And this must have been about like 4:35 in the morning. It was long after they had gotten back from the Edmonton show and they'd gotten home. And then they had this heated phone call conversation, and they meet at this parking lot in the Denny's. And I guess they came together. They walked up together, and Angel said he walked up not basically prepared to fight, kind of leaving himself open, and boom, Alan punched him right in the nose, broke his nose, split his nose, and then the fight was on. At that point, then Angel pulled out his knife from his boot and slashed Alan several times. And Alan's wife, Helen, was there. I'm not sure why she came. Maybe she was there out of concern for Alan. Maybe she was there to lend him moral support, but she showed up there. I don't believe Pat, Angel's wife, actually came. I think she stayed at home, but I could be wrong on that, but I don't believe she was there. But Ellen Coach was there, and somehow in the melee between Alan and Angel, she got stabbed as well. She got slashed several times, I think, in her hand and maybe her wrist. So I'm not sure what was happening there, if she was trying to intervene or get in between them, or if she was trying to assist Alan in the fight. Angel basically just said, I was defending myself, and it was unfortunate she got victimized in the process as well, but it was probably not where she should have been, in a situation like that. Wives or girlfriends should have just stayed out of it and not been involved, putting themselves at risk. But after that happened, Bad News then got a baseball bat. I don't know if Bad News had a knife himself. I believe he did, but I know he got a baseball bat when he was chasing Angel in the parking lot, and then Angel got himself in his own car, and then Alan took the baseball bat and smashed Angel's windshield and I think his headlights, and by this time it was creating quite a commotion, and people in the restaurant noticed these two guys fighting, and knives involved and baseball bats and windows being shattered, and the police were called, and I think both of them were detained and questioned, and I don't think either one of them was charged, but and both suffered some injuries, and it was just a very unfortunate situation that happened. It should never have escalated to that point, but and then there was an incident later, and I guess we can lead up into to that. About 9 months later at a WWF TV taping. But after that incident, which was in the spring of 1987, Angel left the territory and he went to the Maritimes. And, obviously we couldn't have both in the promotion, and he left, which was unfortunate because he was one of our top hands, and he was getting a really good push at the time. We were getting ready to put the tag team titles on him and Jerry Morrow as the Cuban Commandos, and he abruptly had to leave and then go to the Maritimes, and Alan stayed on. So then we heard Alan's version of what happened, and some of the boys sided with him. Some of his followers or guys that were loyal to him, and then others felt more sympathetic to the Cuban because they felt he had been bullied and harassed by Alan for some time, and that Alan was really being the bully and the aggressor here, and could have been more moderate and just moved on from the incident that first happened and moved on. But unfortunately, it escalated and it got out of control, and it's just very sad and scary, that it got that out of hand, and it could have led to serious injuries or even deaths, and I can say this, Alan is probably unequaled or unmatched by most in a street fight. He was an expert in karate and martial arts, and grew up in New York, probably where he had a lot of fights and was legitimately very tough, and probably unmatched by very few in the business, but nobody could outdo Angel in a knife fight. Angel grew up in Puerto Rico, and he knew how to use a knife. He probably had to use it a lot of times growing up there, and as calm and easygoing and pleasant a guy as he was, you just didn't mess with him with a knife. And in this altercation, Alan was very lucky. He didn't suffer more serious stab injuries, but it was just such a horrible incident that was so unnecessary and needless. But I'm going to let you kind of interject there, Devin, and then I can talk about what happened about 9 months later at the TV tapings, which saw further escalation of hostilities between them at the WWF TV tapings.
Yeah, this was all documented as well in an article by The Armpit that you told me to look up, which I did look up. And apparently this TV taping took place January 6th, 1988, in the Nashville area where this confrontation happened. And I guess it was supposed to be the Cuban Assassin's first night with WWE. It's uncertain what exactly the role he was going to have there, but this confrontation happened between Bad News and blew up and caused that opportunity to be denied, I guess.
Yeah, I think their dates are a little bit wrong there. I think this was actually February of '87 because Alan was still working for our promotion pretty close to the end of January in '87, and then he had basically been signed to a contract by WWE. They brought him in for some TV tapings, and he got over great. They really liked his look, and they had big plans for him. But I think this incident took place sometime in February in Kansas, either in the state of Kansas, Missouri. I haven't actually found the exact dates of the shows, but I think it would have been in February. And Alan had been there just a few weeks. He was getting a pretty major push on TV. They were putting him over, and they had big plans for him to work a program with Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man, and so they were already committed to using him and giving him a pretty big push. With Angel, and Angel's work was just incredible. Like there's so many promotions that heard about his high-flying style, the great bumps he took, the matches he had consistently in a lot of the smaller territories, everywhere from Stampede to Nashville, to Puerto Rico, to the Maritimes, and he had a great reputation, as a great bump man, a great high flyer, and somebody who couldn't have a bad match. So they were interested in bringing him in, sort of as a Sandinista tag team. And I think they were going to pair him with a guy named Tio, who was one of the Samoans in a different tag team, but he had a darker look. And that was my understanding. They were going to pair Angel with him because they were both really good tag team aces. And I think it would have been a great opportunity for Angel. He would have done so much in the tag team division there, and I think he would have had a long run there. I think he could have made some great money, and there's so many opportunities. And this would have been at the peak of his career, and the chance to make it to the WWF and make some really good money and have that great exposure. And he really deserved that. He earned that opportunity. So they brought Angel in, for I think a dark match. They wanted to look at him and see what he could do, but I don't think the WWF or the WWE realized the heat that Alan had with Cuban, in Calgary, and that they'd had a knife brawl like 9 months earlier in a parking lot. They had no idea. They brought Angel in, to have a look at him, maybe in a dark match or something. So I guess they were in the dressing room. I think it was prior to the show or during the matches, and I don't think Alan had any idea that Angel was brought in. He was just sort of brought in for a dark match, and they would have a look at him, but they hadn't announced him or advertised him. So Alan had no idea that Angel was going to be there, and he saw him in the dressing room, and he just flipped right out. Went right after him, and then I guess started chasing Angel in the dressing room around a big table, and from what I'd heard from Dynamite, Davey, and some of the others who were there, who witnessed it, Angel shouted, "Not now, not now! Like, this isn't the time or place to settle this." And then one of the agents was there, a guy named Jack Cougar, who used to be Angel's tag team partner with the Cuban Assassins. He was working as an agent for the WWE. Apparently, he threw the knife to Angel. I don't know if he just had his own knife or if he maybe was concerned that there could be hostility between Alan and Angel, because Angel must have been concerned about that. Because I think he knew Alan was going to be there, and he hoped there wasn't going to be any, altercation or problems there. But of course there was. And Alan went right after him. And there was no holding back. So Jack Cougar threw a knife to Angel so he could defend himself, and then Alan started looking for anything he could use. He started. He grabbed some of the tripods and TV cameras and smashed them, and was trying to use them as a weapon against Angel and to stop him from using his knife, to stab him. And so this is all going on in the dressing room among the wrestlers and agents, and it was just chaos, and they all had to get in and separate them and get in between them. And luckily, nobody got hurt, because everyone got in between them and separated them, but it just showed that there was still a lot of tension there, and they hadn't cooled off, and Alan wasn't ready to let it go. He hadn't forgotten what had happened with Angel the year before and what he had done to his wife. He was injured in that brawl that they had, and so from my understanding, then Vince had to make a decision, and he spoke to both Alan and Angel individually, and because they were already committed to using Alan and they had big plans for him, a big title push, and they wanted to launch him as a new Black Afro-American star. They couldn't really give up on him, even though there's this problem you had with Angel, but they couldn't hire both of them, and they hadn't really seen Angel or had a look at him, so they basically didn't offer Angel a tryout or a contract, and I think they just they had to explain to him, because of the issues you have with Alan, we can't bring you in at this time, and that was really unfortunate, because he missed out on that opportunity, and in my opinion, he probably would have finished his career there. He would have been great in the tag team division, and I wouldn't have been surprised after if he was given a position as an agent or a booker, just because he had such great ideas and could put together incredible finishes for any wrestlers, and he was just such a reliable employee and agent, and they could have easily groomed him for that role, or he could have become a coach, because Angel was just one of the most knowledgeable, one of the smartest guys in the business, and he really missed out on those opportunities. But there was a cease and desist order, though, that was given to Alan. So when Vince basically told Alan, I'm not going to hire the Cuban, we're committed to using you. But he warned Alan in the process, you're not to have any contact with Angel. You leave him alone. There's to be no issues or altercations at any shows with Stampede Wrestling or in Calgary where they were both living. And Vince warned him, if there's any repercussions or further incidents, that's it. You know, you're finished. You know, you'll lose your job. So Alan had to abide by that. You know, so because he didn't want to give up the chance to make that money and get that big push. You know, so you know he didn't feel the score was settled, but you know, wisely he. Um, you know, he held back basically and just didn't approach Angel anymore, you know, and just left him alone. But it was interesting because they were both on the same flight, I think from Kansas City, wherever they were flying from, to Calgary the next day or two. They were both on the same flight. And I think Dynamite and Davey were on the flight as well. And there was a lot of tension in the air on the flight, you know. But you know, neither one approached each other. They left each other alone. But I understood that when the plane landed in Calgary, you know, Angel got off the plane very quickly, you know, and didn't waste any time. You know, he just went through customs and was on his way, you know, and you know, he didn't want any further hostility or problems. I don't think he ever did, you know, and that was that, you know. And then he went on to continue working for our promotion. And then Alan stayed in the WWE. You know, and that's basically what happened. But there was a very surprising and unusual reconciliation sometime later, and I can certainly get into that. And you know, and maybe that's the light at the end of this dark tunnel. You know, as there's an opportunity to get them together many years later, and get them to kind of move past their differences. And there was a very reluctant, uneasy truce, but that happened many years later. So, but I can go into that too, Devin. But
Yeah,
interject and offer your own perspectives.
well, no, I didn't know them really, so that would thank you for that. I think the only time I met Cuban Assassin was you used him once on one of your out of town shows randomly in the early 2000s, and I met at Bad News a few times, but you were obviously there. It is Cuban Assassin's 76th birthday today too, by the way. If he watches this, happy birthday. We're talking about you.
Well, that's great, you know, and he's had a glorious life and a career, and I'm glad he's still with us. You know, I haven't seen Angel for some time, but I have the utmost respect and regard for him, and I have a lot of regard and respect for Alan too. You know, and I know he's unfortunately passed away. You know, and it was just so unfortunate that their differences led to such a violent outcome, and you know, pretty serious consequences, you know, that could have ended their lives or permanently injured one another. You know,
and put them in prison. They're lucky they didn't go to jail over that Denny's incident.
You know, and really killed Angel's chances of a big breakthrough with the WWF. But the Stampede promotion kind of restarted back in 99, 2000. My brother Bruce and I restarted the promotion. We had a new crop of younger talent like yourself, Devin, although I think you came maybe a year or two after, but we had Greg Pollock and Duke Durango and Tiger Khan, you know, a really good nucleus of younger stars, a lot of guys that had come through Bruce's and my training, well, Bruce's training camp. I was sort of an assistant coach there. So we restarted the promotion in 99, and Mauro Ranallo, you know, was very famous as a commentator on WWE and NXT. He was our commentator, and we brought Bad News to be an announcer. Alan was semi-retired at this point. He'd had a lot of knee problems, but we brought him as a co-host with Mauro, and they were great together. You know, Mauro was the straight baby face commentator, whereas Alan was very heelish and always identifying and empathizing with the heels and what they should be able to get away with. And he was a great counterpart to Morrow as an announcer. But at the time, Angel was hired to be booker for our shows, and he was the experienced veteran that was leading our shows, and it was great to have him there. But he would not wrestle on the Friday night shows in Calgary, where Bad News was commentating. And I don't think he wanted an aftermath of what had happened so many years before. And this wasn't good, because Angel, who was one of our best guys, couldn't even be featured on the TV shows in Calgary. In Calgary were the most important shows we had, and Angel was just making himself not available, and with good reason. So I basically interjected, and I approached Alan, and I just said, we want to use Angel on our shows. He's an asset to our promotion, and we need to bury the hatchet here. We need reconciliation here. What happened a long time ago, we have to move on from. And I was really surprised Alan was agreeable to it, and I didn't think he would be. I thought he would still have a lot of hard feelings about what had happened, and I don't think they'd ever seen each other since the TV tapings, where they went at it in 1988, and I don't think they had had any contact or seen each other. They'd never been at any wrestling shows together, and Angel had really stayed out of his reach. And when I approached Alan, I just said, we need both of you on our shows. You're performing a vital role for us as a TV personality, and we need Angel's ring leadership and skills in the ring, on these shows. And Alan was very agreeable. He said, sure, it happened a long time ago. I'm okay with that. And I was really impressed with how agreeable he was. So I approached Angel, over a period of a few days, and he was very reluctant, naturally. But I just said, Alan's agreed. He gave me his word. He gave me his handshake, and that meant a lot for me. And Alan shook your hand. That was his word. That was his bond. But he said that he would not provoke Angel or precipitate any violence with Angel. And that he was willing to shake hands and move on from there. So I asked Angel, and Angel was very reluctant, but very wary and cautious. But he agreed to it. So I at the next TV tapings a week after, kind of got them together, and just said, I hope we can move on, and you're both performing vital roles for the promotion, and please let's not have any more hostilities or bad blood between you. And they both did, and I don't think they shook hands. I think Alan offered to shake his hands, and Angel just kind of nodded, with approval, and that was it. And then Angel did work on our shows after that, but I could always sense, there was a lot of mistrust and apprehension there, always concern, that some bad words could lead to something, but it never did. And really credit to Alan, for being a bigger man there and moving on from what had happened. And but they certainly were not buddies after that. They were not drinking in the Ogden Legion like buddies and reliving old times. No. Certainly weren't. There was a very uneasy truce there between them, but I was really happy. Maybe the lesson that can be learned here is, if you have differences with somebody, don't let it escalate to that extent where there's violence, especially with weapons. So if you're a wrestler and you've got heat with somebody or an issue with somebody, be the better man, be the bigger man, and move on from it. Don't let things escalate, and you use some moderation or discretion, but nothing can be gained, from engaging in a fight with someone and one person winning and the other losing, and then other people getting involved and taking sides, and then the office has to handle the matter because somebody will get hurt, somebody could get killed, somebody can lose their job. You can be basically replaced or terminated because you've committed violence, or you've attacked somebody, or you've caused such a negative spectacle for the other wrestlers to see. So hopefully that's a lesson that's learned, and resolve things diplomatically and move on from there, because this incident, had pretty serious and tragic implications, and it cost both of them a lot.
Yeah, that was very unfortunate, but as you said, it's lucky that they kept their lives over that, and neither of them went to jail. Because in the day of the internet, that parking lot fight would have been front page news.
Oh yeah, it was amazing because it never even made the news in Calgary. It happened like it was probably over a 4 or 5 minute span. My dad kind of heard about it sometime after, but we never had one call from a news reporter or anybody asking about what was going on. The police just sort of handled it, separated them, and didn't charge either one of them. And luckily there wasn't that spectacle about it. But in later years, that would have been front page news, and would have been splashed all over the internet for sure, on YouTube or whatever. So.
Wasn't Brian Pillman at one point in some type of backstage, fairly serious fight in Stampede that I think Dynamite Kid had instigated the whole thing?
Yeah. This was a fight he had with a guy named Brick Ronsky, Jeff Belsner, I think was his name. I think Jeff's around somewhere still. He was somewhere in the southern states, but this was, I think, 1988, about a year after the brawl between Alan and Angel, but this was in the dressing room, and there is some shit disturbing going on. Brian Pillman wasn't well liked or received by a lot of the boys because he was pretty brash, pretty cocky, sometimes arrogant, but he could back himself up. And a lot of the guys didn't like him because he was kind of a drill sergeant with the training camp that my brother Bruce and Keith ran. And Brian was pretty militant with a lot of these guys and put them through some pretty humiliating, exhausting drills, and sometimes embarrassed them. If somebody wasn't working hard or doing what they were told, and then quite often Brian would make the entire crew redo laps or exercises because one guy had screwed up or made a mistake. But so he'd had a lot of heat with some of the guys from the training camp, and then some of the boys just didn't like him because they thought he was up Bruce's ass, so to speak. He was getting a push as Bruce's partner in bad company. And Brian was pretty brash. He would come into bars and quite often steal girls, or not even necessarily ring rats, but just girls in bars, some of them pretty nice looking girls, from other wrestlers, just because he was so cocky and had so much confidence, and he could back it up. Like he was a tough athlete, Brian, and a lot of guys didn't like that. He had a lot of heat with heels and baby faces alike, but the bottom line is he was a great performer and did his job well in the ring. So the push he got, the money he made, he deserved that because he was a great performer, even though he lacked people skills, with some of the other boys and some of the other wrestlers. So I guess he kind of rubbed Beltsner the wrong way, and Beltsner felt Brian was ridiculing him or making fun of him in front of the other boys, and so he kind of appealed to Dynamite and Davey, who weren't even working for the promotion; they were working for the WWE at the time. And Jeff felt that if he had a fight with Brian, he wanted to basically stand up and fight Brian. He was afraid Bruce or other wrestlers would intervene on Brian's behalf, and he would be outnumbered. So Dynamite, who didn't like Pillman anyway, he saw Brian as kind of a guy that hadn't paid his dues, and he didn't like Brian's cockiness, right, his arrogance, and was pretty cool around Brian, and maybe felt Brian was moving up the ranks too fast on the Stampede promotion, so Dynamite and Davey both agreed. They said, well, we'll come down to the dressing room and we'll make sure it's a fair fight. But they really instigated, and they psyched Beltsner up to fight with Brian, and gave Beltsner a false sense of courage, that he could stand up to Brian. And for Dynamite, all he wanted to see was action, right? They just wanted to see two guys go at it, and then maybe if he got the chance to go after Pillman, he would have. I think Dynamite was pretty trigger happy. This was probably 6 months before his brawl with Jacques Rougeau at the TV tapings for WWF. So Dynamite was pretty eager to engage in any physical conflicts. He wouldn't shy away from any fight. So they made a point of coming down to our show in the dressing room. I guess they had an off night. They weren't working that weekend for the WWE. So they came just sort of unannounced, without being invited, and came into the dressing room. And then when Pillman arrived there and Beltzner was already waiting for him, he confronted Brian and kind of stood up and called him names and said, "You're an asshole, and I'm tired of taking your shit." And so Brian didn't back down. I think Bruce was in there and I was there. Owen luckily hadn't arrived yet because he definitely would have intervened as well. But so they just started going at it. Brian didn't back down from the challenge. They went toe to toe and had a pretty good fist fight, and I have to say Brian got the better of it. But it was a pretty serious brawl, and Dynamite instigated a lot of it, that was a case where Brian maybe agitated, rubbed somebody the wrong way, but it shouldn't have ended up in a fight. Not like that. Not in the dressing room when we had a show to run and outsiders kind of getting involved. And really, they weren't there so much to intervene on Jeff's behalf. They were there more just to see a fight, and they were hoping Brian would get his ass kicked, and that's certainly not what happened. That wasn't the end result or outcome.
What was Brian's heat with Bill Kazmaier all about? Because apparently that followed them to WCW. I know you guys were helping train Kazmaier as well before he went over to WCW.
Yeah, kind of a long story there, but Bill was, he had some advanced credentials. He was billed, I guess, as the strongest man in the world. He had taken part in some of these strongman contests, and legitimately a very powerful guy. He'd been in some of these strongman events, like pulling tractors and logs, and incredibly strong. And I think he could wrestle a little bit too, but he rubbed a lot of wrestlers the wrong way. When he broke in with us, which would have been, I think, around the spring of '86, he was already talking about, just basically using Stampede as a bridge or a stepping stone to get to the WWE, and the way he referred to that, I'm not going to be here for long, I'm bound for bigger and better things, and that just rubbed a lot of wrestlers the wrong way. And Bill, we could see, he became very, initially he was very enthusiastic, and I think Bruce was training and working out with him, and then Bruce just sensed, well, this guy's pretty arrogant, and I can't really teach him, because he's already looking past Stampede and thinking he's going to make it to WWE. And there was some heat that Bill had with Ted Arcidi, who had also been in WWE and kind of got sent to recondition or upgrade his skills with Stampede. And so they genuinely had heat because Ted had lifted more than Bill. He had a higher bench press than Bill, and so he disputed or challenged Bill's claim to be the strongest man in the world because Ted had outlifted him in the bench press competition. And it was just so silly how they were kind of going back and forth, arguing about that, who was legitimately stronger, and it kind of, became a sideline, which one was going to go back to the WWE and be a bigger star. Ted Arcidi thought he was groomed to go back there and get a big push, and Bill thought he was going to get there ahead of Ted, like Ted had already had his chance. And but that was part of Bill's problem, just that he just came across as pretty arrogant, conceited, and really was just using Stampede, as a means to get to something bigger and better. And it bothered a lot of the wrestlers that were paying their dues and working every night, just to have their place with the Stampede promotion. And here's this guy, who, legitimately had won some strongman contests, but really hadn't done much as a professional wrestler. And so, he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, including Bruce and Pillman. So to make a long story short, Bill was the subject of a lot of ribs. He got tormented by the boys a lot, different boys. He was the victim of a lot of ribs and pranks from Ben Basrab, from Ron Ritchie, some from my brother Bruce and Pillman. And Pillman, I'll be honest, he wasn't afraid of Bill. He wasn't backing down from Bill. Bill could have hurt somebody. He was a big, strong, powerful guy, and he would have had quite a size difference over Brian. But it seemed that when it came down to an actual physical fight, Bill would shy away from it. I think he was too afraid Brian might get a lucky punch on him or something. But there was an incident when we were coming back from one of those infamous Edmonton shows, and Brian had agitated Bill so much. And we picked up a female whose car had broken down. She was a wrestling fan. I won't mention her by name. And this was Bill's kind of sweetheart, a girl that he was having a fun with. It was an odd story. But her car had broken down, and we saw her off Highway 2. And Bill insisted that we pull over and assist her. And it was a cold winter night. And so anyway, she got in the van, and not 5 minutes after she was in the van, and Bill was trying to comfort her and provide his jacket for her. She was necking in the back with Brian Pillman. She kind of left Bill's seat and went right into the back with Brian. And for the duration of the trip, when we got back to the Mohawk gas station, that infamous gas station, she was cuddling and necking with Brian, and Bill was absolutely furious, just enraged. And anyway, when we got to the Mohawk, he said, "I'm going to kill you, Brian. We're gonna settle this when we get to the Mohawk." And when he got to the Mohawk, Brian said, "I'm here. Let's do it." And Bill just whisked her away, got the girl, took off in his car, and drove away. Brian, I give a lot of credit to. Like he didn't shy away or back down from a fight. He was up to the challenge, and he could back himself up. But so there was a lot of heat between him and Bill, but it never actually resulted in an actual fight between them. It never got to that point, even though they couldn't stand each other.
There's a fan on here that wants to know about the Honky Tonk Man, your opinion of working with him over the years.
Wayne Ferris, he was a very colorful performer, a good hand, great on the mic. We did a lot of business with him and Dr. D, David Schultz in the 80s. And unfortunately, there was a period there where both he and Dr. D were unhappy, and they kind of left the promotion and joined the Wavell Starr group in Vancouver. I think they thought they were both such big stars with Stampede that they could jump ship and work for the rival group. And I don't think that worked out so well, for either one of them. But to his credit, he kind of reconciled with my dad, and moved on from that a few years later, after my dad had closed the promotion and then reopened in the fall of 1985. And Wayne came back and had a pretty good run with us. He was great in singles and tag teams. He had a really good tag team with Rod and Ron Starr. They were called the Memphis Mafia, and had some great matches. And did very well with us, and then had a really good singles run with the latter man, Dan Crawford, who I know you've had on your show, Devin. And Dan kind of revived the ladder matches with Honky Tonk, and it was great. And they looked like they're having so much fun together, and we drew some pretty good crowds with that. And then he got his opportunity to go to the WWF. I think Hulk Hogan had seen him at our Calgary show and saw the reaction and spark he had gotten. It was kind of a combined Stampede WWF show that even Dan had alluded to. That's where he actually met Hulk Hogan that night, but not to get sidetracked, but I think Hulk had seen the reaction that Honky Tonk had in this match he'd had with Crawford on the undercard, and like within 3 weeks, WWE had contacted him, and they were very interested in bringing him in and kind of bringing him in as an Elvis type, and giving him the Elvis gimmick and where he would play his guitar. And I think they initially brought him in as a baby face, but they realized he was much better suited to be a heel. But so Wayne capitalized on that exposure he had with the Stampede promotion in 1985 and 86, and had a really good run with the WWE for some time. So I give him a lot of credit. Probably technically not the best performer in the world. He didn't have the greatest body. I don't think he would tell you either of those things, but he was great on the mic. He could get heat. He was a great personality, and he made money in a lot of promotions. He did very well in Puerto Rico. He did well in Memphis, Tennessee, and had a very good run with the WWE.
There's an interesting question on here from Rojo about the Stampede territory extending into Montana. How often did you actually run Montana, and was that complicated being a Canadian company operating in the U.S.?
It was. We ran Montana at different times over the years. I think from the 50s right to the 1980s. The distance to travel there was very long road trips, especially considering we were already making trips to Saskatchewan, very far north in Alberta, places like Fort McMurray, Peace River, and then even BC, the interior of BC. So to run shows there, they were very long trips to make, but we had a lot of success there. But a big problem was the long distance traveling, and then with different governments over the years, we had a lot of difficulty getting visas for our non-American wrestlers. For years and years, they stopped or blocked a lot of our wrestlers from going across the border. In some cases, they already had visas from working in other American promotions or territories, and at different border stops, they wouldn't let them through, and they would just say, no, that's not a valid work visa, or you can't go across. And, we'd have these guys build in main events and matches, and then how do they get home? It's like the van or the bus with the wrestlers has to go on and make the show. The wrestlers that did get across the borders, but the ones that couldn't, they're basically stuck. They didn't have a ride, and they would have to take a bus to get all the way back to Calgary. There were no plane flights, from Billings or the border crossings like Coots or Sweetgrass. So it created a lot of logistical problems with us. But the main problem was getting our non-American wrestlers across the border. And then at different times we were more successful. And then finally, toward the mid-'80s, we just seemed to have a more lax immigration policy, and we were able to get most of our stars, even our British and Japanese and Hispanic stars across the border. They had to have all their documents in order, no criminal records or anything like that. If they had any kind of criminal record, even something like drug possession, they couldn't get across. But if their visas were in order and they had their ID, they were cleared. And we had some really big shows there. From about 1987 to 89, where we featured Owen and Bruce and Brian Pillman and Hiro Hossie and Zodiac and Jason the Terrible. We had some incredible shows and Great Falls and Billings, and our TV was on very strong there. So it was a very important part of our promotion, and it just showed how much the Stampede promotion had expanded. We had coverage all the way from BC to even parts of Manitoba, and through Montana, and that just showed how large our territory was.
I hate to ask about another stabbing, but Warrior Man on here is wondering what happened with Ben Basrab getting stabbed. For those that don't know, I think Ben Basrab was your brother-in-law for a while, and he was also a wrestler in Stampede.
Yeah, he was married to my sister Allison, actually the father of her two kids as well. But Ben had an incident where he got knifed in a parking lot outside a nightclub. This would have been, I guess, the summer or early fall of 1985. It wasn't after a wrestling show or even following a show. We didn't even have a wrestling show that night, but it was. I'm not sure what the name of the nightclub was, the Uptown Club or something like that. But Ben was there that night. Actually, I'd gone there together with him. We'd just gone there to have a few drinks, and they played really good music there. And the place was always packed. You know, there was 400 or 500 people in these nightclubs on close to Electric Avenue, as that was called. It was the strip where all the nightclubs and bars were. They're absolutely packed almost every night of the week, especially weekends. But there was a situation though where the bouncers were throwing somebody out of the bar. Somebody would obviously cause some problems there with security or other patrons, and they'd thrown this guy out. And the guy was resisting, and I guess Ben decided to go after him. Ben kind of knew some of the doormen or bouncers and took it upon himself to go after this guy, and I guess chased him in the parking lot. And this guy had a knife and stabbed him about 3 times, right in the stomach, and pretty serious injuries. I didn't see it. I was actually in the nightclub. I think I was with some other friends, and I heard about the commotion, and I went outside, and the ambulance was taking him away, and he suffered very serious injuries. In fact, I think the only reason he survived is because he had a shirt on, and Ben was just so thick, heavily muscled, that the knife didn't penetrate deeper into his liver. Otherwise, he would have gone the same way that Bruiser Brody did. But it was a pretty serious stabbing incident. Ben had a long scar to show that for a long time. But to his credit, he was out of action for about 4 or 5 months, and came back and had a really good comeback in wrestling. But he almost lost his life that night, with his knife attack.
I understand he was actually a pretty good wrestler as well. I haven't seen much of him, but is there any reason why he didn't make it bigger? Did he just not try hard enough?
I think there were some different reasons there, and some might have been political. He had been married to my sister Allison, and had 2 daughters, 2 beautiful daughters with her. He was very close to Dynamite and Davey. In fact, he made a tour of all Japan with them in 1985, and I think the WWE was looking at him, possibly for a spot. Even if he had been in the undercard or something, it would have been great exposure for him. But I think his antics at some of the shows and getting into fights quite often in bars, and his negative treatment of my sister Allison, which led to their divorce. And I'm not here to demonize his character, but he made some very bad choices, unfortunately, and that kind of cost him his spot with the Stampede promotion, and it's probably why WWE didn't take a more serious look at him, because he certainly had the talent. Ben was a really good performer. I remember he had some awesome tag matches with Phil LaFawn, who wrestled as Dan Crawford in some other areas, and then he was a tag team with Chris Benoit, and then later with my brother Owen. And Ben was a good performer. He had fire. He was a good flyer, and if he had better relations, I think, with the family, and handled his public image a little better, I think he probably would have had a longer lasting career, and you'd probably be honest enough to admit that. So that's unfortunately what happened with Ben, and why his success, I guess, or opportunities were limited.
There's a fan on here, Don Flower, asking, why did you fire Don Muraco? I've never heard that you fired Don Muraco.
Oh, no, he was never fired. Don was brought in really as a transitional champion. There wasn't any plan to use him on a long-term basis, and he was never fired. When the Bulldogs came in, we brought them in after they had left the WWE, and at about the same time, Don had been released from WWE and was a free agent and was available for work. So Dynamite, who was booking for our promotion, suggested we bring Don in and put the North American title on him. And it got over very well. And the idea, though, was that he would come in at a later time, a few months later, and drop the title to somebody else, right? I think it was Davey Boy that he dropped the title to, but that was always the plan for him. He came in and did some shots with us, did some pretty good business with us, and the plan was for him to put the title on somebody else, and he did, and was very reliable and did a great job for us. But he was never fired. There was never any issue over his pay or how well he was used. He just did a very good job for us.
Now, to wind it down here, I know this is a very long story, but I've never heard your version of it. To end off here, could you explain the situation in the Northwest Territories there where Dynamite and Bruce got into it, and it was just a bad tour, I guess, overall, even though you had good crowds?
Yeah, and I wasn't there. I kind of wish I had been there because I could have probably intervened or helped mediate. But, I was I had a teaching assignment in Calgary at the time, and I was doing more of the TV production work at the time. This was on a tour of northern Alberta. I think it was Hay Lake or Hay River, maybe, very far north. And the morale was really low with a lot of the wrestlers. One of the vans had broken down, and there was, a lot of bad behavior going on with the wrestlers. It was almost anarchy. There was so much stuff going on. A lot of resentment by Dynamite because he had been the booker for my dad for several months when he left the WWE and came to our promotion, and he, unfortunately, didn't work out very well for either party. Business initially was quite good, and then it kind of dropped. I think there was just too much emphasis on a lot of gimmick matches, like too many cage matches, street fights, tape fist matches, and it was almost overkill. And there were some other factors as well. But as hard as Dynamite was trying, business just wasn't sustained. He was quite unhappy. And I think he kind of just resigned the position. It wasn't like he was even fired or asked to step down. But the truth was he wasn't making a lot of shows. And I think he was pretty bitter and pretty depressed, because he really did want to reignite our promotion and turn it around, and I think he felt let down, but he also, was, I think, upset with my dad, maybe because my dad had kind of given up on him, and, and my dad didn't pay him for the shows he wasn't making. Like, he was supposed to be the booker and making all the shows, and he was staying home for a lot of the shows. So naturally he didn't get paid, and that just led to some friction there, which is unfortunate. And then Bruce sort of assumed the position again as the booker. Bruce had been out of that position for about 6 months since Dynamite was hired, so it was kind of a bitter pill for Dynamite to swallow that Bruce was, hired again, or just put himself in that role or position again. And Dynamite did, he didn't want to work underneath Bruce. He was pretty unhappy. He didn't feel that he should be under Bruce's command under any circumstances, and and they had just gotten back from a tour of Japan, where they had made some pretty good money, but as I said, there's a real lack of morale on a lot of the shows, and some terrible behavior. There's a lot of guys drinking, taking all sorts of pills. There's a lot of ribbing going on. It wasn't even safe to take a drink from somebody. If somebody passed you a beer, you didn't know who had laced it, with the Halcyon or a Percocet or something. There was just some very bizarre behavior and antics going on, and it just seemed like a lot of it happened, when Dynamite was at the shows. Either he was instigating it or he was watching it, and unfortunately Davey sometimes sided with Dynamite and just followed along with that, so they were at the show, and again there was a lot of unhappiness with one of the vehicles breaking down, and like about 15 wrestlers all having to pile into one van. Very overcrowded situations, and Bruce was driving in his own car. I think with Bob Johnson, who was the agent of the show. So a lot of resentment that Bruce was riding in a cushy vehicle of his own, and he wasn't having to sweat it out with these guys in a packed van, even though the wrestlers had broken one vehicle down. And so I guess at this show, the wrestlers got there about 3 hours late. It was like supposed to be like a 7 o'clock show, and Bruce had to carry on the show for about an hour and a half, working in a match with Bulldog Brown, and then he had to, because the wrestlers hadn't arrived there, including Dynamite and Davey and the rest of them, Bruce had to then work with Kerry Brown in a long, prolonged match after that, and then going back and forth on the microphone and just basically trying to stall the show until the wrestlers got there. And then I guess when the wrestlers arrived there, Dynamite was so wound up, by some of the other wrestlers about Bruce appointing himself as booker, and nobody wanted to work for Bruce. And so Dynamite confronted Bruce in the dressing room and accused him of something. He said, "I heard you were laughing about us having to ride in a van packed with 15 guys while you were riding first class in the vehicle." And before Bruce could even defend himself or explain anything, Dynamite punched him, and I think Davey headbutted him. So it was kind of a double attack from both of them. Bruce got his jaw broken in the process, and it was just a very bad situation. And a lot of the other wrestlers were egging Dynamite on, and that just showed the behavior of some of the wrestlers. A lot of them were really out of control, with the steroids and the drinking and the partying at night, and just very bad behavior. And it was a pretty low time for the promotion, but that's unfortunately what happened in this altercation between Dynamite and Bruce. And very unnecessary and very unfortunate.
Yes, and I guess you guys probably didn't go back there too many times after.
No, not too many times after that. No, Dynamite didn't work that long for the promotion after, though he did come back for a series of matches with my brother Owen in Calgary, and it was almost like vintage Dynamite. He put his work boots on and really went all out to show he could still perform in spite of the injuries he had suffered. The back injuries and both his knees were shot. But it was just incredible how well he performed in those matches against Owen. He really extended himself, and it was pretty impressive to see that, in spite of all the negatives, that had surrounded him for some time.
There were some fans on here asking why, when you appeared for WWE, you didn't bill yourself from Calgary.
I just wanted to keep a low profile. I was only there for a couple of TV tapes. It was more of a working holiday. It was over the summer between semesters at school. So, it wasn't like I was getting any major billing or anything. So I just used that name, and I certainly wasn't trying to compete with the Hart name that had already been established by Brett and Jim, or Owen for that matter. So, and quite often when I wrestled on the Stampede promotion here, I used the name Ross Lindsey, so there was just some separation, and I wasn't going to be compared or linked, to Brett or Bruce or Owen, or anyone else in the family. Plus Wayne's a referee as well. So, and I didn't mind that, it allowed me either to sink or swim on my own, and I didn't mind using a different persona there. So.
The Grease is asking, what was the relationship like with Grand Prix Wrestling and Stampede? There was a lot of intermingling of talent.
Yeah, pretty good relationship. We brought in a number of stars from Grand Prix. I remember it was really hot in the early 70s, and their TV show was on here. They had replaced All Star Wrestling from Vancouver with Grand Prix Wrestling, which was actually a much better show. The exposure they got here was great because a lot of those wrestlers we brought in and featured here, including Edward Carpenti's nephew, Jackie VX, and the Kiwis, who later became the sheep herders and the bushwhackers in WWE. But they were over so strong on TV from the Grand Prix Wrestling that we brought them in here, and it was great. And then some of our stars went and worked in Montreal as well, and it was a pretty nice exchange of talent. But then Grand Prix folded. A couple of years later, it didn't seem to last, even though it had a really big boom in the early 70s, with stars like Andre the Giant, Don Little, Jonathan Tor Kowalski, and they kind of peaked and then declined, very rapidly. And then I think the whole Montreal territory went down for a long time. The All-Star promotion with the Rougeaus and the Grand Prix promotion with, I think it was Gino Brito and maybe Jack Britton, but they had a really good promotional war for a long time, and fans got to see some incredible talent and big names on both shows. And then, it just seemed like the whole province went into a pretty big recession, for the rest of the 70s. And then it kind of made a comeback in the early 80s with guys like Dino Bravo and Rick Martel. But but I certainly fondly remember the Grand Prix Wrestling and some of the stars we brought over from there to our promotion.
Rodzor wants to know about Mike Shaw, who went on to be Bastion Booger. His best gimmick was probably with you guys as Muckin Singh.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike had a lot of different aliases. He was Klondike Mike, I think, in the All-Star promotion in Vancouver, and then he wrestled here as Mike Shaw, and then later sort of adopted the name of Muckin Singh when he formed the Karachi Vice with the Great Gamma and wore the turban, and was sort of, it had become a transitional, I guess, Muslim, from the United States. He converted, I guess, to the Muslim faith, although, he certainly didn't talk about that in his interviews, but he always wore the turban in the ring, and then Gamma was more of the truer devout Muslim, even though he wasn't Muslim, he was an East Indian, but he was always billed from Pakistan and got great heat from there. And then they kind of formed the Karachi Vice. And that was my brother Bruce's invention. It was one of Bruce's ideas. Let's form a Karachi Vice, and it kind of just revitalized both Muckin and Gamma because they had been here a long time, but it gave them a whole new identity and new heat. And then they recruited some other wrestlers to join the Karachi Vice, like Strangler Steve DeSalvo and Terry Brown and some others. And Muckin had a great run here for a long time, and he wrestled under a lot of different names and different promotions. I think as Norman the Lunatic in WCW, and then as Bastion Booger, which was, kind of, I think, a downward spin for his career. It was not a very complimenting or flattering role that he had there, and I think he really missed the days when he was with the Stampede promotion, when he had great interviews, he had great rapport with Ed Wellington, our announcer, and just some incredible matches with my brother Owen, but also some great matches with Bruce and Brian Pillman. And it was incredible how well Muckin Singh worked here, and it was kind of sad to see what he was reduced to, just because he wasn't programmed very well or given the chance, in the bigger promotions like WCW and especially WWE.
There's a fan on here named Wall Ace that wants to know what happened to Lethal Larry Cameron, one of the big stars you guys had in the 80s.
Yeah, Larry was our last big star, our top heel with the Stampede promotion before we finally closed at the end of '89. Part of the movement of new Afro-American stars. And Larry was just a pleasure to work with, unlike, some of the other Afro-Americans and Canadians who had racial problems with other wrestlers. Sometimes blame on both sides to speak. But Larry was never like that. Right? Larry never had any racial tension or problems. He was just a great guy, a great worker. Worked hard in the ring and had a great run with the promotion. He was our last North American champion here. Before we finally closed the promotion down. And then Larry had a tour, I think, with New Japan and was getting some exposure in a few other promotions. And had a tryout, a TV match with WCW, and I don't know why they didn't capitalize on him. He looked great. His technique in the ring was really good. And a great physique. Had the look. Could work well in the ring and no attitude. If there was no racial or cultural problems with him. Unlike a lot of the other Afro-Americans, that's what I always liked about Larry, and which made him stand out, with a lot of the other wrestlers. But tragically, he died. I think he was working in a big tournament in Germany, and I believe my brother Owen was on the same tour. They were working for autobiography, and I think Larry had been there a couple of years and was a regular there. Was getting used very well, and apparently he had a heart attack, I think, right after his match had finished. And I think it was in the dressing room after, and it was very shocking because he wasn't that old. I think he was maybe in his mid to late 30s, and and had a heart condition, and died in the dressing room after his match in Bremen. So just very sad, very unfortunate, and a career and a life cut too short. But, kind of similar to Luther Lindsey, who was one of my dad's favorite people and one of the toughest but nicest guys in the industry, and a really good amateur wrestler who worked out with my dad for years in the gym and was kind of on the level of George Gordienko, for shooters. And Luther just had so much natural raw power and strength. And but anyway, he died after a match in South Carolina. Just finished a match, covering a guy 1, 2, 3, and then he just collapsed. He didn't even make it to his feet. He just died of a heart attack at 46. So unfortunately, some careers were cut so short. So you have to enjoy your life and your career while you can, because you never know when it might be taken away from you.
That is sad. I wasn't aware that he passed away. And finally, Ted Arcidi, I did an interview with since the last time we spoke. Do you think he had more potential if he had continued on with wrestling? Because he seemed to be a good heel, but he said that the supplement business was more lucrative for him than.
I think so. But Ted, he was an interesting personality. He had some interesting dynamics with Bill Kazmaier, and it would seem to be real life heat between them, and yet the boys got a big laugh at it. It kind of agitated both of them. But Ted, he was good on the mic. He was an interesting personality. He came across as pretty obnoxious and arrogant and kind of like a bullyish heel, because he was so big and he was so strong. And I wish he had stayed here longer. I think, he'd been here for about 3-4 months, and maybe he just felt that he wasn't going to get the opportunity to go back to WWE. Maybe they were looking at a lot of other wrestlers beside him, and it seemed kind of ironical. Neither him or Kazmaier ever made it to the WWE, even though they both touted they were going to be. Ted said he'd be going back there and getting a big push, and it didn't happen for him. Ted and Bill never ever got his start. Bill kind of left here on bad terms with a lot of wrestlers, and and I guess maybe his reputation preceded him, but he never really got that opportunity with WWE. And then sometime later they brought him into WCW, but it was a pretty short tenure there, and he didn't last long there, so.
Well, thanks a lot for talking to us again. It's great to get this knowledge of yours recorded, because So much wealth of information coming from that brain of yours being involved in wrestling all your life. For fans that want to follow you on social media, it's all under Ross Hart, right? If they want to look you up.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter and Instagram. I don't check my accounts all the time, but I try to, So yeah, they can contact me there, and it's nice to hear from a lot of them, who enjoy the memories of Stampede, and there's so many of our matches I'm seeing on YouTube. Like, I don't know where these matches are coming from, but some matches even from the early 70s, the fans must have just recorded on their beta cams or VCRs. But it's very refreshing to see a lot of those old shows and the comments that go with them, and sure brings back a lot of memories. But it's been great being on this show, Devin. I really enjoy the guests you have on here, and you've covered some very interesting topics that are very relevant in the industry, and had some very interesting guests. And it's great that these wrestlers are still relevant and have something interesting to share with us, and a lot they can teach us about their careers and their post careers and how they've adjusted to life after their careers. And I always look forward to seeing your specials.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'll let you close this off with however you want to close it for the fans here.
Thanks for keeping Stampede Wrestling alive and a lot of your memories, and for a lot of the nice comments you shared and how much you enjoyed the promotion, and what my dad meant to a lot of you, as the promoter and developer of a lot of talent. So it's very gratifying, very comforting to know that I and a lot of my family members are still in your thoughts, and we've given you a lot of great memories and experiences, and it was really worth it for us as well. It really was. So thanks so much to everyone.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if